Your Humanities Half-hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Welcome to Your Humanities Half-hour. I'm Catherine Perry. It's a pleasure to have in studio today retired educator and my former 8th grade English teacher, Ivan Probst, here to talk about his book, Perseverance and Grit, the contributions of Agnes McPhetres to education across the Pacific. Mr. Probst, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. May I call you Kathy, or do you want Catherine?
You, knowing me for so long, may call me Kathy.
Good. Okay, that works for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of graduated to Catherine, but I guess congratulations are in order on two fronts for you. One, you recently had a big birthday, and of course, this book.
Number 80.
Congratulations on both of them. Tell us, what is this book about?
The book is about the person whose picture is on the front, Agnes Manglona McPhetres. But it's about the contribution she has made to education. And what was somewhat difficult in my coming up with a title for this book was I first came up with the title, The Contributions to the CNMI. I thought, well, her contributions to education were far more than that. So then I came up with the contributions to education across Micronesia. But that doesn't cover it all, because she did significant assistance in helping out with the American Samoa Community College. And for a long time, she was affiliated with things going on in community colleges in Hawaii. So I finally expanded it to contributions across the Pacific. And that, I think, captures the wide area where her impact was made and her influence over education over most of her life, not just the years she was at the college, but as many people know, she retired for a few years, but Agnes retiring doesn't mean go home and sit on the couch and read books. She was a businesswoman for several years. She was a contractor. I hired her to do some work. And then she was called back into service, educational service. Governor Enos asked her to take over Northern Marianas Trades Institute. And he said he would support her financially, the administration was, if she would do that. And so in 2014, she came back into education and has been the CEO at Northern Marianas Trades Institute since then. So her field of endeavor is very wide, but it was never publicly known, bits and pieces, but in a comprehensive way. And I had a lot of documents from the time I worked at the college that I wanted to publish, and that's what led to publishing this book.
Well, I have to say, in this brief introduction you've given, I had no idea that of her involvement in education beyond Northern Marianas College and NMTI. So it sounds like there is a lot of details contained in this book. What is it that motivated you to write about Mrs. McPhetres?
I've known her almost the entire time I've been here. I first met her when she was working for the Trust Territory headquarters, Department of Education, up on Capitol Hill here. I went to a meeting, and she was the Assistant Director of Education, second in rank for education across the whole Trust Territory. I met her. I was so impressed with her. And when the opportunity came for her to leave the Trust Territory, and we needed somebody of her caliber in the Department of Education in the Northern Mariana Islands, so my friend Ed Klingbergs and I basically recruited her to come to work there. And one of the things I failed to mention in the comprehensiveness of what she's done, when I was pulling together the articles for the book, things that I had in my files, because when I left the college, all the work that I had done, I had available in digital format, and I put them all onto a CD and brought them all home with me. And so I was able to draw upon those. But one period that I didn't have any records for her, but knew that she had served effectively for trust territory, and that was back in the 70s. And so that was a big thing I was concerned about in pulling this book together. I had records of what she had done in the CNMI, but not in the trust territory. But I think Providence played a role, and I was able to obtain information about that. And so that's included in this book. And there's very, very little ever that has been written about education in the trust territory. And so I got 2 or 3 people to make contributions to this book, and those details are in here. I think they're really significant history, and I'm very proud of having acquired that and included it in this book.
You were mentioning about the title of the book and how it expanded from contributions to the CNMI, to Micronesia, to the Pacific. But why did you choose those 2 words, perseverance and grit?
That also was, I had to come up with something, because that's not catchy enough, the contributions of Agnes McPhetres across the Pacific. So I had to come up with something catchy. And so I asked friends to contribute words that would characterize Agnes, and I had and then I played with them, and nothing really grabbed me until finally just dawned on me the 2 words that really characterize her, I think, significantly, are the 2 words perseverance and grit. And if I could take just a moment,
Sure.
I could expand upon those. So when I did the book launch, I said, I want to make sure everyone understands the definition of perseverance. The definition of perseverance is continued effort to do or achieve something despite difficulties, failure, or opposition. Oh my goodness, that fits Agnes to a T. And I think one of the best examples, although there are many, but one of the best examples is that one of the things she wanted early on at the college, after it was accredited as a community college and could offer 2-year degrees, accredited, recognized 2-year degrees, she had long wanted for there be the opportunity to offer a baccalaureate degree in education for teacher training, because her vision was to have teachers trained locally. I mean, we send teachers away to the mainland, and they're taught and educated about mainland culture, and it all fits the mainland. But if we could train our own teachers here, they would be trained in the linguistic background, the values, the history of the Northern Mariana Islands. And so she wanted to do that, her vision. But the Junior Accrediting Commission, an institution can only offer an associate degree. So she lobbied and lobbied with the 2 accrediting commissions, the junior and the senior commissions, to get them to allow NMC to offer a baccalaureate degree, just 1 degree. And so the 2 commissions met, and they finally agreed that NMC would continue to be accredited by the Junior Commission, but it would be accredited by the Senior Commission to offer 1 baccalaureate degree. Now, that's not something you do overnight. It takes the whole idea, the concept presented, the two accrediting bodies to buy into it, and then to work out the details. So they had to have visits out here to the college, but finally she had set it on the road, and it was going to happen. But it didn't come totally about while she was president, but 2 years after she retired and left the college. NMC was accredited by the Senior Commission and able to offer a baccalaureate degree and a 4-year teaching degree here locally, so that teachers could be trained locally. That was perseverance. I mean, it took her years to accomplish that, and had to work with a number of people, and it's the only institution in the whole Western area of accreditation that has this unique quality.
And you can imagine what an impact that has been on local students to have, their own people from the community who understand them and their culture, teaching them in the classroom.
Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing what that, and think of all the teachers that have been trained since then, who got their degrees here, and have become teachers in our schools, and the students that they are influencing. It's so widespread. It's pretty significant, I think. Yeah. But to mention, NMC is now totally accredited by the Senior Commission, so they can offer more than one. But that was kind of an intermediary step.
And would you say the word grit also falls under that example?
Not that example. I have another example. But first of all, the definition of grit, again, fits Agnes so well. It's firmness of mind or spirit, unyielding courage in the face of hardship.
Wow.
And when she became president of the college, my goodness, the mountains that she had to climb, and because the college was deeded, the college land was deeded to NMC, but the problem was there were many government agencies that still had offices up there. They didn't want to move out. So there was a big battle in getting them to move out. And one of the things that would happen at night, Agnes would have the locks changed on their doors so that when they came to work in the morning, they couldn't get in their office, and only the NMC employees could get in. Well, when the directors of those agencies came to work in the morning and found that the locks, so they had them changed back, and they had their own lock. This went on for a few days, or a few times, a few weeks. And finally, the government agencies finally gave up and they moved out completely. But it was her grit that just kept persisting until the college was actually able to use. And it took a few years because some of them didn't move. The cafeteria, for example, for PSS was in there for years, but finally moved out. Well, rehab took them several years to move out, but persistence and grit paid off, and the college finally got all of it.
Now, we do want to mention this is an authorized biography. I'm sure she wouldn't mind people knowing that story. How much did you collaborate
let me tell you,
with
those
her?
stories, one of the things that, as I finished the book, I'll tell you in a few minutes about what the components of the book are, but as I finished it, I thought one of the things that's not in here are the stories about Agnes.
The
and
seasoning.
Since I've known her for so many years, I know a lot of stories.
Yes.
And so I wrote an afterword. There's an afterword in the book, and it includes several stories about Agnes and the things that she did that were just absolutely outstanding, mind-boggling in many cases. You know, she jumped out of an airplane,
Yes.
tandem, to
Yes.
raise money for the bleachers for the gym up there.
Yeah, and that was just like 10 years ago or
That
something?
was toward the end of her period working at the college. And so she needed money, and someone said, well, maybe you can get pledges if you agree to go can them out of one of those planes. I'll do it. So she got enough in pledges. She got, it needed $20,000. She got 10,000 pledges. Legislature said, if you can get the 10, we'll provide the additional 10. So she was in her, probably at that time in her 60s when she jumped out of the plane. So there are stories like that in the book, which I wrote those and included them, but they're in there. And so that's something to enjoy when you're reading it.
Our guest today is Ivan Propst, and we'll be back with more after this break.
Did you know that you can donate up to $5,000 to the Humanities Council through the CNMI Education Tax Credit Program? Donations from individuals and corporations qualify and can be used to offset your local wage and salary tax, BGRT, and earnings tax. Call our office at 235-4785 to see how you can support humanities programs in our community and obtain a tax credit for your donation. Sizu Usmaasi, Olomai, and thank you.
Welcome back to your Humanities Half Hour. We're speaking with author Ivan Probst on the book Perseverance and Grit, the Contributions of Agnes McPhetres to Education Across the Pacific. What are some of the other highlights of this publication?
One of the things that I think I need to mention is that, or maybe I did already, but when I left the college, I had, because of the positions I had and the work I did for Agnes, I had a lot of documents that I was able to put on CD and bring home with me. One of the most significant that only 3 people over the years was familiar with, the author, who was Len Coffer. I think many people might remember Len Coffer from his wife, Connie Coffer. Yeah, he passed away a few years ago, but when he was working at the college, he wrote an article about, basically it was the history of NMC from the time it started up until the time Agnes retired. I had that, and I knew that somehow I needed to get it in publication because that's an important piece of our history and an important document about all that Agnes has done for the betterment of our Commonwealth. But I thought it's not long enough for its own standalone book, so what can I do? I wanted to do it, and it was sat there, and I thought about it over the years, and finally, about a year ago, I thought, well, if I look through my stuff, I can surely find some other things to put with it, and I've used the term build a book. So I wrote some things, were things that I wrote when I was up there, like the State of the College address, really tells at the end of Agnes's term up there all the things that had been done for the college. A really, really great public record, I think. But this article by Len Coffer needed to get. So it's really the centerpiece of the whole book. And it's excellent reading, I think, to tell you about what went on. The college had to fight for what it got, the programs that were established, and so that's the beginning of the book. And then I wrote, because I continued to do work for Agnes more recently while she's been CEO at Northern Marianas Trades Institute. Everything she writes or somebody writes, they send to me to review and to edit and revise. And so I'm very familiar with what goes on up there. So I wrote a chapter in this book about what she has done and how she's really transformed that institution into a viable training institution for getting local workforce rather than having to bring in alien laborers, which we all know the law is diminishing that significantly. And then, so I was beginning to put these pieces together, and one night we had a social event at our place, and Agnes came in with, some people may know, Dr. Tusi from American Samoa. He's been friends for years, but he showed up that night with Agnes, and during the course of the evening, I talked to him about what I was doing. He said, oh, I got things I can write about her, because she and he worked together back when they were both top-level administrators in their relative institutions. So he wrote a fabulous piece for me about what Agnes did when she was working at the Northern Marianas Department of Education. And I thought, well, if I can get that from him, maybe I can get some of her former colleagues from Trust Territory to also contribute something. Some may remember the name Melody Aktoka.
Yes.
Who worked, she worked for the Trust Territory under Agnes way back in the 70s, and then Melody came to work more recently at NMC and worked under Agnes. So Melody, I thought she would put together a decent piece, but the piece she put together was astounding. Her memory of the days that she worked at TT under Agnes and her description of what Agnes accomplished, her contributions back then, are really significant history about a period very little has been written. So I'm really proud of what I was able to get to go into this book. And then also the things that she did that I think deserved to be recognized while she was at the college that were furthering the humanities. And she was an early founder of the Humanities Council, she and Ron Barrow.
Yes. Another interesting thing about this book is there are actually 4 forewords, which is extraordinary. People must have really wanted to contribute their thoughts.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it was here, but I got it around without mentioning it. 4 forewords, I thought of one, like most books would have, and I contacted Judge Govindo and asked him if he would write, because he was the legal counsel in the very early days of the college, so he knows what was going on. He was at all the meetings with the legislature, the board meetings, and he said, well, I'd be happy to do that. And so he wrote one of the forewords. Then I thought, well, that's only about CNMI, and the book is about across the Pacific. So one of the persons I know well worked at top levels of administration in the community college system in Hawaii. And I contacted him and said, could you write a forward from the perspective of the region? He said, I'd be happy to do that. And so he put that one together. So for quite some time while I was working on other parts of the book, I had those 2 forwards. Then I got thinking, those forwards are written by men, white men, and not young men. So I thought, I have to have a female. So I thought about it. I went through lists and tried, and I finally thought, one of the persons who has definitely benefited from the paths that Agnes has cut for females because when I came out here in the 60s and 70s, there were no females in education, not a single female principal, no administrators. So Agnes was the first, and she paved the way for those after her. So I asked Congressman Tina Sablan, to write the 3rd forward, which she did. It's a fabulous piece of work, I think. And then the 4th one, I thought there are no persons writing with the perspective of an employee at NMC. So the 2nd president of NMC, following Agnes, was Jack Sablan. And I asked him to write about one of the significant things that Agnes pushed, and that was local capacity building. Jack benefited from that tremendously. So he agreed to do that. And that's why we have the 4 forwards.
We mentioned at the start of the show that you just turned 80. Why invest your time in telling a story like this?
Because it was deserving. That's why. And she's a woman who's done so much. And even she in a TV interview said, I've forgotten all the things I did. So, to get it down on paper, it was, to me, a way to show my appreciation for, I've spent over half my life in this place, and my appreciation for the Northern Marianas, the people, and for Agnes, who has been a close friend, a really close friend. She calls me her big brother over the years. And so it's just something I wanted to do, and did it.
Aside from the Northern Marianas Humanities Council, which provided a grant to help with the book, are there any other particular sponsors or partners that you would like to recognize or thank?
Well, we got the grant, and I budgeted for the printing based upon what I was told the books would cost. When we sent for a price quotation, we got them printed in Hong Kong. It was far beyond what was put in the grant. So we needed more than twice the amount. And we got several anonymous donors, I won't mention their names, but to contribute about $2,000. And that was significant. So they were the people that helped bring this about so we could print enough copies to meet the demand.
Where can people find the publication?
There are 3 places that people can go to and get a copy of the book. They're not being sold because the grant and the donations covered the costs of layout, printing, and ancillary funding. But we're making them available, and people can acquire a copy of the book for a $10 donation. at one of three places. One place, the one that's easily accessible, Jotenkidzu Library. So if you want to copy the book, drop by there, make your $10, or you can donate more if you want, but a minimum of $10 donation, and you'll get a copy of the book, and the donations stay with Jotenkidzu Library. So the full amount of the book is you're making a donation also to Jotenkidzu Library. That's one place to pick it up. Second place is Northern Marianas College Library. They're available there. You can go by the library there, pick up a copy for $10 or more donation, and that money stays with NMC Library. The third place is Northern Marianas Trades Institute at Lower Base, where Agnes is the CEO now. And if you go by there and pick up a copy or 10 copies, those monies will stay with NMTI to buy supplies and materials for the institution.
Any final thoughts before we go today?
Just get a copy of the book and enjoy it, and especially the stories. Don't forget to read the preface and the afterword, because those have some gems in them.
Well, I will have to say, your experience in education here in the Marianas, somebody could write a book on you as well. Let me ask, if someone were to write a book about you, what would you choose, or what might you choose as the title to kind of summarize your experience?
Oh, my goodness. You know, one of the things that I sort of pride myself on is I've always been quite willing to work behind the scenes. I don't need the recognition. I get the satisfaction just from doing things. So the people I worked with over the years, especially at the college, they asked me to do things, write and put together reports, and I wrote speeches for actually 3 of the presidents. And I never needed the recognition. I was doing it so the person I was doing it for would have the recognition. And I'm happy to work behind the scenes and do things for people and let them bask in the glory. That's really, I think, what I had to offer.
And we all benefit from that spirit. So thank you very much for this book and for the contribution not only of Mrs. McPhetres, but also of yourself in making this information available to us and these stories.
Thank you, Kathy, my student in the 8th grade.
Again, the name of the book is Perseverance and Grit, the contributions of Agnes McPhetres to education across the Pacific. And our guest today has been the author, Ivan Propst. This is your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.